Hi team, it's Gina Brooks, and today we're going to go over some interview tips during COVID-19. So as you know, everything has changed in the world and more employers are doing either phone interviewing or they're doing remote interviews through Zoom or some other type of video conferencing program. So today I'm going to give you some tips on how to prepare for those types of interviews, but also give you some tips on if you have to do an in-person interview, what do you need to be mindful of? Okay, and as you know, I love to start my videos with a quote, so I found a really good one, so I'm going to read it to you. It says, I had a job interview at an insurance company once, and the lady said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, celebrating the 5th year anniversary of you asking me that question. And that was from Mitch Hedberg. You can actually steal that answer because I think it's perfect, because almost most interviewers will ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And what he's saying, very charming by the way, is saying, well, I hope to be celebrating you asking me the same question 5 years from now, because he's sharing that he's committed and confident that he's going to have that job for the next 5 years. So great quote, great interview tip. Okay, so how do you become prepared for a remote interview? Well, obviously now more people are doing phone interviews or Zoom interviews. So it's, for many of us, I mean, I personally I haven't been on an actual interview for myself in 20 something years because I've been employed in the same company for so long. But obviously I've been on a lot of interview panels. Being in HR, I have a lot of experience studying interviewing processes. So I feel like I know a few things that from the HR perspective and from an employer's perspective that we're looking for. But one thing I wasn't really prepared for, even as an interviewer, is how this COVID-19 has changed how we do interviews. Before COVID, we had already started doing the pre-screening on the phone, which I absolutely loved, and we'll go into some reasons why. But in terms of like the Zoom interviewing, that's a whole new animal. And I think for most employers, probably more the smaller employers, they haven't used a lot of remote interviewing. So let's go over some tips. Okay, either way, in person, not in person, you always want to be prepared. So I'm going to start by talking about, let's say most employers, I'll be honest with you, are doing more of the remote interviewing, but there are employers that still do the in-person interviewing. And so what do you need to prepare for in terms of how that interview is going to go right in the midst of a pandemic? So first thing you want to do if you're invited to an in-person interview is ask the employer if they'd be willing to interview you remotely. Now, let's say you have maybe a condition, you don't need to share all that personal information. We actually prefer you don't, but you can always ask, I would feel more comfortable doing a remote interview. Is that possible? A lot of employers do have this happen, so they're prepared and very understanding and compassionate about making these types of accommodations. So if you don't feel comfortable going on an in-person interview, that might be an option, and you're always willing or able to ask that question if they can make that accommodation. But let's say if you do have to go on site to have an interview, ask in advance what type of protocol they have in terms of their safety precautions. You want to make sure that you know what to expect when you go into that office. Most likely, they should be at least taking your temperature, asking you COVID-related questions to make sure that you, haven't had any symptoms, and you might be required to wear a mask. I suggest you wear a mask regardless if you're required to wear a mask or if any of the people on the panel are wearing a mask. I still suggest that you wear a mask. It's a safety precaution. And I think most interviewers would understand your concern for your safety, and safety comes first, okay? But there are some things to be mindful of, and many of us are used to wearing the masks, and we're kind of aware where the limitations are, right? So some of the things you want to make sure is during an interview, just like you're dressing professionally for an interview, suit, dark colors, nothing flashy, you want to do the same thing with your mask. They have a lot of fun masks out there, cute little sayings, sometimes inappropriate sayings, flashy with, all kinds of designs. I suggest for an interview, if you just stay with the basic solid colors, black, blue, just like you would a suit, or if you have to have some kind of print because you're a fashionable gal or guy, make sure that print is small, not loud. Okay, you still want the focus to be on you, not what you're wearing, even if it's a mask. And then you also want to make sure you elevate your voice, because as you know, talking in a mask or asking questions with mask and getting information from other people with the mask, there's a lot of muffling noises. So you want to make sure that you really emphasize your voice to make up for that muffle of the mask. Okay, and the same thing could be said for those who are interviewing. If they're wearing a mask, you might have more difficulty understanding the questions that they're asking. So don't be embarrassed. You shouldn't be either way. If you need more time to answer a question, or you didn't hear the question, or you're not sure about the question, it is always okay to say, do you mind repeating that question? It's okay. And you might need to when you don't understand what they're saying. So be aware of that. Okay, in terms of greetings, obviously now we don't do the shaking of the hands. Social distancing is very important. So what do? Most employers, most job interviewers know that this is not something we do anymore, and they will lead the charge. Follow their lead in terms of greetings. Otherwise, I would introduce myself. Hi, I'm Gina Brooks. It's a pleasure being here. It's a pleasure meeting you. And don't put out your hand. You can just say. Now, if they put their hands out to shake, that could be awkward, right? You're like, oh my gosh, you don't want to just ignore them. You can either just say, oh, it's a pleasure meeting you, and you could do the elbow bump or something like that. Again, most employers know protocol in terms of social distancing, but nevertheless, you want to be prepared for those different situations, okay? Okay, so now we're going to go on to remote tips in terms of phone or Zoom. So now if you've applied for a job, an employer, there's a few things. Either way, one way or another, they're going to be contacting you by phone, either to set up an in-person interview or Zoom call, or even to do a pre-interview. And pre-interviews are really a great way for the employer to get to know you before you even come in the door. But I do want you to be mindful of a few things. Being prepared, knowing you're out actively seeking a job, you should be aware of phone etiquette before. Meaning, if you don't have a voicemail set up, if you have one of those robotic ones, change that. Make it a personal one. Introduce yourself. Ask for the person to announce their name, what company they're with, and leave a return phone number. You don't want to do a robotic one, because sometimes an employer might think that that's not the actual correct phone number, okay? Don't get fun, like don't put Baby's Got Back song behind your greeting. Be very professional, simple, to the point, okay? Now, if you answer the phone, obviously, if you know you're looking for a job and you don't recognize the phone number, you can make an assumption that it's not a family friend, right? So answer that phone in a cheerful, engaging manner. Your tone is very important. This is why we do a lot of the pre-screening phone calls. It's so that as an employer, we can learn, okay, are they prepared for even a phone interview? So let's say you're not even prepared for a phone interview. We certainly aren't going to invite you back for an in-person interview. So you want to be prepared for those phone calls from a potential employer, whether asking you to come for an interview or asking you to come for a pre-interview, okay? So also, if you are sleeping or you are at an event or something and you see a phone call, it's smarter to just let it go to voicemail than to answer it with a sleepy voice or a distracted voice. Okay, that's very important. And then you also want to make sure that if you do have a pre-interview setup, that you have a atmosphere that is quiet and has no distractions, meaning no dogs, no children, no TV on the background. You don't want to be like in the middle of an interview yelling at your dog to shut up, and all that good stuff. So make sure that you pre-plan a private, quiet area. Make those accommodations, even if you have to go to someone else's home or to another office or something. Ensure that your environment is quiet where you can concentrate and that the employer sees that you're serious. Okay. So many companies, including us, we use pre-screening to weed out those that we don't want to interview back. So it's a really good time for you to showcase your soft skills, which is kind of a new buzzword to expressing your enthusiasm, your ability to communicate, to articulate, to sound friendly and excited about the job. So a lot more employers are looking at soft skills, even more so than soft skills and fit, even more so than necessarily skills and abilities. Because the thought process, we can always teach you those skills and abilities, but it's very difficult to teach someone soft skills or a personality. So don't think that that phone call isn't a test, because it is, and use it as a test and be very prepared for that test. Okay, and then also prepare yourself for some of those regular questions. They usually aren't going to ask you for a full interview or be an actual phone interview. They're usually going to ask you for a couple quick, maybe one or two interview questions. It'll usually be like, why are you interested in this job? What do you know about our company? And can you explain how your skills, your past experience in education make you qualified for this position? Okay, knowing that, knowing the basics, be prepared, right? And they can't see you, you're not in person, so there's no reason why you can't have a nice cheat sheet with some of those things that you would like to point out easily at your hand, so you can actually hold on to it and articulate without all those nerves some of those points you want to make. Again, that pre-interview is really a way to get to know you, your personality, so make sure you showcase that. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about Zoom call interviews, and that's a whole other entity, right? Because all the can't even say technological things that could happen, right? There's always something technical that could go wrong when you have a Zoom interview. Employers are very understanding of that and aware of those kind of shortcomings. But just saying that, I noticed that there have been some times, and I've done a few skits on this, but how people don't prepare for Zoom calls. And you want to prepare for a Zoom interview just like you would an in-person interview. So you're not going to be, just because you're at home, you're not going to be sitting in your sweats or your jeans or nothing below the belt. Dress to impress. Dress as if you are actually in person at that interview. Not only do they want to see that, but it is a known psychological fact, how you dress makes you feel more confident. So make sure that you dress appropriately for those Zoom phone calls. They are looking and watching that. Same thing goes for Zoom calls. It does a phone interview. Make sure that you don't have any distractions. Make sure that you prepare for that time in advance, where there's no kids, dogs, other types of distractions, so that you can completely be engaged in that phone interview, in that Zoom interview, okay? And if you're a current employee, and I say this for both Zoom and in person, if you're a current employee and you are interviewing for promotion, go in just like you don't know these people interviewing. You might know them very well, and it's very nerve-wracking. Actually, I find it more difficult to interview someone that works for you rather than a stranger, right? Because you know them and you know what their strengths and weaknesses are, right? So you want to make sure that you don't assume that the interviewer knows you. Actually act the opposite, as if they don't know you. Now, I'm not saying don't be authentic. You don't want to do a complete personality change. Don't do a Sybil or anything, because trust me, the hiring managers know who you are, and they probably have heard about your performance. And this is why I tell people at all times, give 100%. Your performance in one job will follow your entire career. And trust me when I say this, give everything you have to every position you have, because unless you move to another company, it's really hard to shake those negative performance situation that you might have had in a different position. So again, if you're interviewing for a current position at a company you already work at, do the same thing you would do if you're working for a company that you didn't know. Same preparation, same treatment. Okay. Have a cheat sheet. Even on the Zoom call, I have a cheat sheet. I mean, I'm looking at it occasionally. You could do the same as the phone call. Have some bullet points that you want to make sure that are important to you to express. Sometimes our nerves get the best of us and we forget some of the most important qualities that we want to share. And if you're looking at the job announcement, you're going to see specific job skills that you should have, right? That helps you prepare. Let's say you don't have that job skill. Prepare in advance to how you're going to answer that question and find something comparable that you can use. Never say I have no experience in that. Try to find something comparable, although it might not be directly related. At least say that, I don't have experience specifically in that, but I have done this and I think it's comparable and it'll help me to be able to quickly learn that particular skill. Okay? Smile and keep eye contact. Your personality is imperative, and I'm telling you, the number one thing employers are looking for is cultural fit. I mean, do they see you being able to fit in with the mission of that corporation and the other employees that you will be working with? So your personality is huge in terms of how you communicate and how you're perceived. So make sure you showcase your personality. Smile, be friendly, answer the questions. You don't need to be super serious, but you need to be thorough. Be authentic. They want to know who you are, okay? So for the interview, you should have done your research on the company and reviewed absolutely everything. I say my number one tip would be to get on the company's website, review everything about the culture of the corporation, its mission, its vision, its values. Go thoroughly through the whole website and learn everything you can about the company, their customer success stories, what their focus is. Pull up annual reports. Go back and Google them and see if there's any news articles. All of those, write them down on your cheat sheet. Pepper those into your interview. Nothing impresses an employer like knowing that the applicant has done their research and that they actually key in how the corporate culture fits in with their personal vision. Okay, number one tip. Also, be prepared to practice some of those common questions. Like I told you earlier in the phone interview, most companies are going to ask very similar questions. Your skills and education and experience, how does it fit in with this position? How do you qualify? Why did you apply for this job? What do you know about this organization? Another normal one is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Be prepared for those questions, right? Practice. Just like you would for a presentation, practice your answers. Try to not be robotic in those answers, but practice makes you be able to key into some of those skills and abilities that you really want them to know about, okay? And my last tip today is going to be at the end of the interview. Almost all employers ask, well, do you have any questions for us? Okay. Don't say, no, I do not. There's no way you do not have any questions. Okay. And what the question I like to answer or have employees ask me is, can you tell me how your company, right? I'm the job applicant. I want to ask the employer, how does tell me about your company's culture and what's important to you in an employee. Okay, and so they're going to answer that. If you've done your research, you kind of know about their corporate culture by reviewing their website, you're able to go back and say, that's fantastic because I actually do A, B, and C, which fits into your mission. I am a service-minded individual, so that obviously fits into your mission. And a matter of fact, those skills and abilities that you said were important to you, I feel like I was able to show you during this interview that I would make a great employee for your position, and also I'm a great fit for your company. And I look forward to hearing from you. Always make sure that you have some way of making an impact at the end. Okay? So those are just a few interview tips. I mean, we can go on, and in the future I will provide maybe some more specific interview questions and tips, but I think this is a good start in terms of preparing for either a phone or a Zoom interview. Okay? This is Gina Brooks signing off. You guys have a wonderful day. Until next week. Toodles. Bye.